They called me a gold digger and made me sign papers to protect their son from my broke family. His mother watched me sign with this satisfied smile, thinking she'd won. But when they discovered I actually owned their mansion, their business, and pretty much their entire world, that smile disappeared real quick. Before we dive into the story that turned my life upside down, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, you're going to want to hear every single detail of what happened when the tables turned completely. My name is Mayan, and I'm about to tell you how a single piece of paper revealed everything I needed to know about love, family, and what happens when people judge you by the color of your skin and the size of your bank account. But here's the twist. They had no idea about the size of my bank account. It started 18 months ago when I was 25, working as a volunteer coordinator at the downtown community center. I loved my job, even though it didn't pay much. There's something beautiful about helping families find resources, watching kids discover new opportunities, and knowing you're making a real difference in people's lives. That's the kind of wealth I thought mattered most, until I met Ryan. I was at Starbucks on Morrison Street, laptop open, working on grant applications for our youth programs. It was one of those busy Tuesday mornings where everyone's rushing to get their caffeine fix before facing the day. I had spreadsheets pulled up, calculator in hand, trying to stretch our tiny budget to cover art supplies for the after-school program. That's when this guy at the counter started having trouble with his card. The barista was getting impatient, the line was building up behind him, and I could see his frustration mounting. Without really thinking about it, I closed my laptop and walked over. "I've got it," I said to the barista, handing over my card. The guy turned around and I was struck by these genuine green eyes that looked more grateful than embarrassed. "You didn't have to do that," he said, "but thank you. I'm Ryan." "Maya," I replied, and yes, I did have to do that. Nobody should start their day stressed over a coffee. He insisted on paying me back, which led to him buying my coffee, which led to us talking for 2 hours straight. Ryan worked in marketing for his family's consulting firm, but he didn't carry himself with that entitled attitude I'd come to expect from guys in his tax bracket. He asked about my work, laughed at my stories about community center chaos, and seemed genuinely interested in the programs we were trying to fund. For the next 8 months, we were inseparable. Ryan would meet me after work, bring lunch during my busy days, and spend weekends helping with community events. He'd roll up his expensive sleeves to help set up for fundraisers, played basketball with the kids, and never once acted like he was slumming it in my world. I was falling hard, and I thought he was too. But then I met his family. The invitation came with careful wording. "Mom wants to meet you," Ryan said one evening as we walked through the park. "Just dinner at the house, nothing formal." Right, nothing formal. Their house was a monument to wealth, a sprawling estate in the most exclusive part of town, with circular driveway, perfectly manicured gardens, and the kind of architecture that whispers old money in every brick. As we pulled up in Ryan's BMW, I smoothed my dress, my nicest dress, which suddenly felt completely inadequate. Victoria, Ryan's mother, greeted us at the door with the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. She was elegant in that effortless way money can buy, with silver hair pulled back in a perfect chignon and jewelry that probably cost more than most people's cars. "So, you're Maya," she said, looking me up and down like she was assessing a purchase. "Ryan's told us so much about you." The way she said "so much" made it sound like a problem. Charles, Ryan's father, was warmer but distant. He shook my hand firmly, asked polite questions about my work, but I could see him calculating, measuring, trying to figure out where I fit in their world's hierarchy. Dinner was served in a dining room that could seat 20, with china that looked like it belonged in a museum and wine that probably cost more than my monthly salary. And throughout the meal, Victoria kept making these comments. "Community work must be self-fulfilling," she'd say with this tone that made fulfilling sound like code for unprofitable. "I imagine it keeps you busy, even if it doesn't pay much." "Actually," I said, cutting into what was probably a $100 piece of beef, "I find the work incredibly rewarding. We've helped over 300 families this year access resources they needed." "Oh, how wonderful," Victoria replied, but her smile was sharp. "It's so important to give back, Charles and I have always believed in charity. Charity. She was calling my life's work charity, like I was some sort of noble savage helping my own people out of the goodness of my heart. Ryan jumped in when things got too obvious. Maya's actually being modest. She's written grants that brought in over $2 million in funding last year alone. Victoria's eyebrows rose slightly. $2 million? How impressive. I had no idea community work could be so lucrative. The way she said lucrative made my skin crawl, like I was somehow profiting off helping people. Like the idea of a young Black woman handling that much money was inherently suspicious. But I loved Ryan, so I kept trying. I brought them homemade cookies when we visited, remembered their birthdays, and bit my tongue when Victoria would make comments about my background or ask intrusive questions about my family.
"Tell me about your parents, dear," Victoria said during one particularly uncomfortable Sunday dinner. "Ryan mentioned you were raised by a single father?" "Yes," I replied, cutting my asparagus with deliberate care. "My mother passed away when I was young. My father raised me." "How difficult that must have been," she said with false sympathy. "What kind of work does he do?" "He's in property management," I said, which was technically true, just not the whole truth. "Property management," Victoria repeated, like she was tasting something unpleasant. How practical. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that my father, Marcus Washington, had built one of the largest commercial real estate empires on the East Coast. Starting with a single apartment building he'd bought at auction in the 80s, he'd quietly assembled a portfolio worth over $3 billion. But Dad had made a choice early on to live modestly. After watching what wealth did to some of his business associates' families, he decided to raise me with different values. We lived in a comfortable but not extravagant house. I went to public schools. I worked summer jobs and learned the value of earning my own way. "I want you to know your worth has nothing to do with what you own," he'd always told me. "I want you to be strong, independent, and grounded in who you are as a person." When Dad passed away from cancer 2 years ago, he left everything to me. But he'd also left detailed instructions about continuing his philosophy. The wealth was a tool, he said, not an identity. Use it wisely, but never let it define you. So I kept living the same life. I kept my job at the community center, kept my modest apartment, kept driving my reliable Honda. The only thing that changed was that now I was quietly funding the programs I used to write grants for. The new computer lab at the center? My money. The expanded youth programs? Me. The scholarship fund that was sending dozens of kids to college? Also me. But I never told anyone. Not my coworkers, not my friends, and definitely not Ryan. Looking back, maybe I should have. Maybe it would have saved us both some pain. But I wanted to know who Ryan really was. I wanted to see if he'd stand up for me when he thought I had nothing. I wanted to know if his love was real, or if he was attracted to the idea of being my savior. The answer came when he proposed. It was a Saturday evening in November. We'd spent the day at the farmer's market, and Ryan was cooking dinner in my small kitchen. He seemed nervous, dropping things, checking his phone repeatedly. When he finally got down on one knee beside my dining table, I was genuinely surprised. The ring was beautiful, a classic solitaire that probably costs more than most people make in a year. I said yes through happy tears, thinking maybe, just maybe, love really could conquer all. We drove to his parents' house to share the news. I was practically floating, imagining Victoria's surprise, hoping this might finally be the moment she'd accept me into the family. Victoria's first words when we walked through the door were, "Well, I suppose we'll need to discuss a prenup." Not congratulations, not welcome to the family, a prenup. The way she said it, so matter-of-fact, like it was as natural as discussing flower arrangements. Ryan's face fell, but he didn't argue. "Mom, can we at least celebrate first?" But I could see he wasn't going to fight her on this. That night, Victoria called me directly. "Maya, dear, I hope you understand this isn't personal. It's just that Ryan has worked so hard to build his career, and with your situation, well, we need to protect what he's built." My situation. Code for being Black, working class, and not from their world. The prenup arrived a week later, and it was brutal. 47 pages of legal language that basically said I'd never have any claim to anything he owned, no matter how long we were married. If we divorced, I'd get minimal alimony for only 2 years. If he died, I'd get a small life insurance payout, but nothing from his estate. And here's the part that really showed their character. If I ever embarrassed the family or damaged their reputation, and they got to define what that meant, I'd get nothing at all. Ryan sat there while his family's lawyer explained each clause, occasionally wincing but never objecting. "It's just a formality, babe. It doesn't mean anything," he whispered to me. But it meant everything. It meant they saw me as a threat, a gold digger, someone who couldn't possibly love their son for who he was. It meant that in their eyes, I was exactly what they expected, a poor Black woman looking for a come-up. I signed it anyway. I signed it because I loved him, because I wanted to prove I wasn't what they thought I was, and because some part of me, the part that had internalized too many messages from society, believed maybe I did deserve their suspicion. I signed it with tears streaming down my face, while Victoria watched with that satisfied smile, like she'd won some kind of game I didn't even know we were playing. 3 months later, everything changed.
The catalyst was a conversation that happened during what would be our last family dinner before everything exploded. We were sitting in that massive dining room again, Victoria holding court as usual, when she started talking about real estate. "Charles is thinking about expanding his office space," she said, cutting her salmon with surgical precision. "The lease on the Morrison building is coming up for renewal, and honestly, the landlord is being unreasonable about the terms." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. The Morrison building was one of Dad's properties, one that I now owned. "Really?" I said carefully. "What kind of issues is he having?" Charles leaned forward, warming to the topic. "The owner is some reclusive investor who never shows their face. Everything goes through property management companies. We've been trying to negotiate a longer lease with better terms, but they're not budging." Victoria nodded. "It's so frustrating dealing with these anonymous property moguls. They have no understanding of community business relationships." I almost choked on my wine. Anonymous property mogul? If they only knew. "Have you considered looking at other buildings?" I asked. "We've looked," Charles said, "but honestly, most of the premium commercial real estate in this area is owned by the same entity, Washington Holdings. It's like this mysterious company owns half the city." Washington Holdings, my company, named after my father, managed by the same team he'd built over decades. Ryan squeezed my hand under the table, misreading my silence as discomfort with the conversation that was over my head. "Don't worry, babe. Business talk is pretty boring." Victoria smiled at me with what she probably thought was kindness. Maya wouldn't know about commercial real estate, dear. Not really her world. Not my world. I was sitting at their table, in their house, which I could have bought 50 times over, listening to them complain about lease terms with the company I owned, while they explained that I wouldn't understand business. That night, I made a decision. The next morning, I called Thomas Morrison, the executive who'd been managing my real estate portfolio since Dad's death. Thomas had worked with my father for 15 years, and was one of the few people who knew about my inheritance. "Thomas," I said, "I need you to arrange a meeting with Charles Richardson's company, the one that's been trying to renegotiate their lease on the Morrison building." "Of course, Maya. Are you thinking about adjusting their terms?" "I'm thinking about making them an offer they can't refuse. But first, I want to meet with them personally." "Are you sure? Your father always preferred to maintain anonymity in business dealings." "Dad wanted me to use the wealth wisely," I said. "I think it's time I started being more hands-on." Thomas arranged the meeting for the following Wednesday. Charles and his business partner would be coming to the Washington Holdings office downtown to discuss their lease renewal. They had no idea they'd be meeting with me. I spent days preparing. I had my attorney review everything, made sure all the paperwork was in order, and mentally rehearsed what I was going to say. This wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. It was about showing them exactly who they'd been underestimating. Wednesday morning, I put on my best business suit, one I'd bought for Dad's funeral, but never worn since. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw him reflected back, the same determined expression he'd wear before important negotiations. The Washington Holdings office occupied 3 floors of a gleaming downtown tower. When I walked into the boardroom, Charles and his business partner were already there, sitting at the mahogany conference table with their papers spread out, looking confident and prepared. Thomas made the introductions. "Gentlemen, I'd like you to meet Maya Washington, CEO of Washington Holdings." Charles looked confused for a moment. Then recognition dawned. His face went completely white. "Maya? Ryan's Maya." "The very same, though I think we need to discuss more than just your lease renewal." For the next hour, I laid out everything. I showed them the portfolio, dozens of properties throughout the city, including the building that they work in, the shopping center where Victoria bought her designer clothes, and yes, even the exclusive neighborhood that they live in. Every single house on their street was owned by Washington Holdings. "I don't understand," Charles kept saying. "You work at a community center. You drive a Honda." "I volunteer at a community center, and I drive a Honda because I like it. My father taught me that how you live says more about your character than how much you spend." When I finished my presentation, Charles sat in stunned silence. His business partner, who had been making increasingly uncomfortable glances toward the door, finally spoke up. "So, what do you want from us? What are your terms?" "My terms are simple. I'm prepared to offer your company a very favorable lease renewal, below market rate, longer term, excellent conditions. In exchange, I want you to do something for me." "Anything," Charles said. "I want you to go home and tell your family exactly who you met with today. I want you to explain to your wife that the anonymous property mogul she's been complaining about is the same woman she made sign a prenup because she was worried about her family's money." The drive home was the longest 20 minutes of my life. I kept imagining Ryan's reaction, wondering if this would finally be the moment he'd stand up for me, or if he'd be more concerned about his family's embarrassment. I didn't have to wait long to find out. Ryan was waiting in my apartment when I got home, which should have been my first clue about how this was going to go. He had a key, but he'd never used it without calling first. He was pacing my small living room like a caged animal, running his hands through his hair in that way he did when he was stressed. "Maya," he said the moment I walked through the door, "we need to talk." "I figured we might," I said, setting down my purse and trying to read his expression. Was he angry, hurt, embarrassed? All of the above? "My dad just called me," Ryan continued, his voice tight. "He said you own their building, that you own most of the buildings downtown. That you're worth... He stopped, shaking his head. Is it true? I looked at the man I'd been planning to marry, the man I'd signed away my rights for, the man who'd sat silently while his mother treated me like a charity case for months, and I made my choice. Yes, I said simply, it's true. Why didn't you tell me? The question came out like an accusation, like I'd somehow wronged him by not revealing my wealth. Because I wanted to see who you really were, I said. I wanted to know if you'd love me when you thought I had nothing. I wanted to know if you'd defend me against your mother's comments about my background and my situation. Ryan's face reddened. That's not fair. You lied to me. I never lied. I told you my father was in property management. I told you I worked in community service. Everything I said was true. I just didn't tell you the whole truth. The whole truth? Ryan's voice was getting louder. Maya, you let me pay for everything. You let my family think you were some kind of charity case. You made me look like an idiot. And there it was. Not, I'm sorry my family treated you poorly. Not, I should have stood up for you. Not even, I'm amazed by what you've accomplished. Just concern about how he looked. You made me look like an idiot? I asked quietly. Ryan, you watched your mother make me sign a prenup that essentially called me a gold digger. You sat there while she made comments about my background, my job, my family. You never once defended me or told her to stop. How exactly did I make you look like anything? You don't understand, he said, starting to pace again. My family has a reputation. My dad's business depends on relationships, on trust. When word gets out that his son's fiancée has been playing games... Playing games? The words hit me like a slap. Ryan, I've been living the same life I've always lived. I've been working the same job, living in the same apartment, driving the same car. The only thing that's changed is what your family knows about my bank account. But why didn't you tell me? He asked again, and I could hear the real question underneath. Why didn't you trust me? Because I needed to know if you'd choose me over your family's approval. And now I have my answer. The conversation spiraled from there. Ryan kept talking about trust and honesty, but what he really meant was control. He'd fallen in love with the idea of being my protector, my guide into a better life. Now that he knew I didn't need protecting, that I was actually in a position to protect him, he didn't know how to process it. We talked in circles for 2 hours before he finally left. He didn't slam the door or storm out dramatically. He just looked defeated, like someone had changed the rules of a game he thought he was winning. The next few days were a whirlwind. Word spread quickly through their social circle. Wealthy families in small cities love their gossip, and the story of the community center worker who turned out to be a billionaire was too juicy to keep quiet. Victoria called me 3 times before I finally answered. Maya, darling, she said, her voice dripping with honey now instead of poison. I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. Charles told me about your meeting, and I just want you to know how impressed I am by your family's business acumen. My family's business acumen. Yesterday, it was my modest background and my situation. I was wondering if you might join me for lunch this week. There's a charity gala coming up, the Children's Hospital fundraiser, and I think you'd be perfect for our planning committee. The same charity gala she pointedly not invited me to last month because she thought I wouldn't fit in with the crowd. That's very kind, Victoria. but I'm pretty busy these days.
Of course. But Maya, about that prenup, I hope you know that was just standard procedure. We certainly never meant to imply anything negative about your character. Standard procedure. As if making your son's black fiancée sign away her rights was just something all families did. I ended the call without committing to anything. But Victoria wasn't done. Over the next week, I received invitations to 3 different social events, 2 charity functions, and a casual coffee meeting from Ryan's sister, who had barely acknowledged me before. But the person I was most curious about was Ryan himself.
He finally showed up at my apartment the following Saturday morning, holding coffee from our old spot and looking like he hadn't slept much. I almost didn't let him in, but curiosity won out. "I've been thinking," he said, settling onto my couch like he still belonged there, "about everything you said. About my family, about the prenup, about us." I waited, giving him space to work through whatever he'd been rehearsing. "You were right," he continued, "about me not standing up for you, about my mother's comments. I should have shut that down from the beginning." It was progress, but something in his tone suggested there was a but coming. "But Maya, you have to understand how this looks from my perspective. We're supposed to be partners. Partners don't keep secrets like this. Partners also don't let their mothers treat their fiancés like charity cases. Partners defend each other, even when it's uncomfortable. I know, and I'm sorry about that. I really am." He leaned forward, reaching for my hands. "But we can fix this. We can start over. We can tear up that prenup and do this right." "Can we?" I asked. "Because Ryan, the problem isn't the prenup. The problem is that you needed to know about my money before you could see my worth." "That's not fair, isn't it? Your family spent months treating me like I was beneath them, and you let it happen. The only thing that's changed is their knowledge of my bank account. If I was still just Maya from the community center, would you be here apologizing? Would your mother be inviting me to charity galas?" Ryan was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him struggling with the truth of what I was saying. "So what happens now?" he asked, finally. "Now we both know who we really are, and we can decide if that's enough to build a relationship on." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't. The damage was too deep. The trust too broken. Ryan had shown me exactly where I stood in his priorities, and it wasn't high enough. The final blow came 2 weeks later, at what should have been a moment of reconciliation. Ryan had planned an elaborate dinner at the same restaurant where we'd had our first real date. He'd clearly spent a lot of time orchestrating everything: our favorite table, the wine we'd shared that first night, even the playlist from our early days together. "I want to make this right," he said over appetizers. "I want to prove to you that I can be the man you deserve." "How?" I asked. "I've been thinking about your work at the community center. With your resources, we could do so much more. We could expand the programs, maybe open satellite locations. I could help you manage it all. Maybe even leave my dad's firm to work with you full time." I set down my fork and stared at him. "You want to manage my foundation?" "Well, not manage exactly. Partner with you. Use my business background to help you maximize your impact." And there it was. He wasn't offering to support my vision or follow my lead. He was offering to take over, to be the public face of my father's legacy, to turn my life's work into his new career opportunity. "Ryan," I said carefully, "what makes you think I need your help managing my foundation?"
I don't mean it like that, he backtracked. I just mean with my connections, my family's network, we could really make a difference. His family's network. The same family that spent months looking down on the work I was already doing. You mean your mother's network? The same mother who called my work charity and acted like I was some sort of noble savage helping my own people? She didn't mean it like that. She meant it exactly like that. And now that she knows about my money, suddenly my work is worth partnering with? Ryan's face fell. Maya, you're twisting everything. I'm trying to support you. No, I said, standing up from the table. You're trying to find a way to make my success about you. You're trying to figure out how to benefit from the wealth you didn't know I had. I left him sitting there, with the check and the carefully planned reconciliation dinner. As I walked to my car, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: relief. The relationship limped along for another few weeks, but it was over. Every conversation became an argument about trust, about honesty, about what we owed each other. Ryan couldn't get past the fact that I deceived him, and I couldn't get past the fact that he let his family treat me poorly for months without intervention. The final straw came when he suggested we should start fresh by moving in together into a house that I would buy, but that would be ours. I don't think you understand, I told him during our last real conversation. I don't need you to upgrade my life. I don't need your family's acceptance or their social connections. I needed you to see my value before you knew my net worth, and you couldn't do that. So that's it? You're going to throw away what we have because of some test I didn't know I was taking? I'm going to stop pretending that someone who won't defend me when he thinks I'm poor will somehow become a better partner when he knows I'm rich. I gave him back the ring and kept the prenup. Not because I was bitter, but because I wanted to remember the lesson it taught me. Never let anyone make you sign away your worth, financial or otherwise. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new office, the top floor of the Washington Holdings building downtown, when Thomas knocked on my door. Maya, there's someone here to see you. Says it's about the Richardson account. Charles walked in looking nervous and significantly more humble than the last time I'd seen him. He'd requested this meeting through his lawyer, which seemed unnecessarily formal until he started talking. Maya, I owe you an apology, he began, taking the seat across from my desk. Several apologies, actually. I gestured for him to continue. First, for how Victoria and I treated you. There's no excuse for the assumptions we made or the way we behaved. We were wrong, and I'm sorry. It was a start, but I could tell there was more. Second, I need to ask for your help. The lease terms you offered through your company were more than generous, and I'm grateful, but I'm hoping you might consider extending that generosity a bit further. What kind of help do you need, Charles? He shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Ryan is struggling. The breakup hit him hard, but beyond that, word about everything that happened has spread through our social circle. People are talking, and it's affecting his reputation, his career. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I meant it. I'd never wanted Ryan to suffer. I just wanted him to grow. Victoria thinks maybe if you two could be seen together publicly at some charity event or social function, it might help smooth things over, show people that there are no hard feelings. I stared at Charles for a long moment, processing what he'd just asked. You want me to appear in public with Ryan to help rehabilitate his reputation? Just once or twice, nothing romantic, just cordial.
professional even. Charles, I said slowly, do you understand what you're asking me to do? I'm asking you to help my son. You're asking me to use my presence, my reputation, and my social standing to clean up the mess that Ryan made when he chose his family's approval over defending his fiancée. You're asking me to be the bigger person again, to save face for a family that spent months treating me like I was beneath them. Charles had the grace to look ashamed. When you put it like that, that's exactly what it is. And the answer is no. Not because I want to hurt Ryan, but because the best thing I can do for him is let him face the consequences of his choices. Maybe then he'll learn to make better ones. Charles left looking disappointed, but not entirely surprised. I felt bad for him. He was trying to protect his son, which I understood, but I wasn't going to compromise my dignity to help Ryan avoid the natural consequences of his actions. That conversation got me thinking about consequences and second chances, about the difference between forgiveness and enabling. Over the next few weeks, I found myself reflecting on my father's lessons about wealth and responsibility. Dad had always said that money was a tool, not a weapon, but he'd also taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people experience the results of their choices. 3 months later, I heard through the grapevine that Ryan had taken a job with a smaller firm in another city. He was starting over, building his career on his own merits instead of his family connections. Part of me was proud of him for that choice. Victoria still tried to maintain contact, sending Christmas cards and occasional invitations that I politely declined. I bore her no ill will, but I also had no interest in pretending we had a relationship based on anything other than my bank account. The most surprising development came from an unexpected source. About a year after everything exploded, I got a call from Ryan's sister, Jennifer, who I'd barely spoken to during our entire relationship. Maya, I know this might seem strange, but I wanted to talk to you about something. I'm getting married next spring, and I've been thinking about what I learned from watching everything that happened with you and Ryan. Congratulations on your engagement, I said, curious about where this was going. Thank you. The thing is, my fiancé comes from a very different background than our family. His parents are immigrants. They don't have money and they work really hard just to get by. And I can see my mother starting to do the same things that she did to you. Jennifer paused, and I could hear her taking a deep breath. I wanted to ask you how you handled it. How you stayed strong when everyone was questioning your motives and your worth. It was one of the most honest conversations I'd had with anyone from Ryan's family, and it gave me hope that maybe some good had come from the whole painful experience. The most important thing, I told her, is to remember that their opinions about your fiancé's worth say more about them than about him. And if you really love him, you have to be willing to defend him, even when it's uncomfortable. Even if it means standing up to family, especially then. Because if you don't stand up for him now, when you're still trying to win their approval, how will he trust you to stand up for him later when the stakes are higher? Jennifer thanked me for my honesty, and I wished her well. I hoped she'd learn from her brother's mistakes. 2 years have passed since that prenup changed my life, and I can honestly say I'm grateful for every painful moment of it.
Not because I enjoyed being judged and dismissed, but because it taught me exactly what I was worth and what I was willing to accept. The Maya Washington Foundation now operates in 12 cities, funding education programs, community centers, and small business development in underserved communities. I still volunteer at the original community center where I started, though now I do it from choice rather than necessity. I've met someone new. His name is David, and he's a teacher at one of the schools our foundation supports. He knew nothing about my wealth when he first asked me out. He was just interested in the woman who showed up every week to tutor kids in math and seemed to genuinely care about their success. When I finally told him about the money, months into our relationship, his reaction was everything Ryan's should have been. "That's amazing," he said. "Think of all the good you can do with resources like that." Not, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" or "How does this change things between us?" Just genuine excitement about the positive impact I could have. David has met my accountants, my lawyers, and my foundation board. He asks thoughtful questions about my work and offers insights from his classroom experience. He's never once suggested that he should help me manage anything, and he's never treated my wealth as an opportunity for himself. More importantly, when we attended our first high society charity event together, and some old family friend of Victoria's made a snide comment about new money, David shut it down immediately. Maya's family has been building wealth and giving back to the community for decades. The only thing new here is your education about it. That's what love looks like. Not someone who tolerates disrespect until they learn you don't need their protection, but someone who sees your worth from day one and isn't afraid to defend it. I still have that prenup, framed in my home office. Not as a monument to betrayal, but as a reminder of the most expensive education I never had to pay for. It taught me that someone's true character isn't revealed when they think you have something to offer them, but when they think you have nothing. Patricia's prenup was supposed to protect her son from me. Instead, it protected me from a family that could never see my value beyond my bank account balance. It showed me that true wealth isn't about what you have. It's about being with people who see your worth regardless of what you own. Ryan reached out to me once, about 6 months ago. He'd heard about the foundation's expansion and wanted to congratulate me. The conversation was polite, even warm, but it confirmed what I'd already known. We'd both grown into different people. He seemed more thoughtful, more aware of his privilege, and I was genuinely happy to see that growth. "I've been thinking about what you said," he told me near the end of our call, "about defending the people we love. You were right. I should have stood up for you from the beginning. I'm glad you understand that now. It'll make you a better partner to whoever comes next." "Maya, do you think we could ever—" "No," I said gently but firmly. "But I think we can both be grateful for what we learned." And I am grateful. That prenup taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. Never let anyone make you sign away your worth, whether it's financial, emotional, or spiritual. Never accept less than you deserve because someone else can't see your value. And never, ever let anyone convince you that love means making yourself smaller. The foundation continues to grow. Last month, we opened our 15th community center, and next year we're launching a program to provide interest-free small business loans to entrepreneurs in underserved communities. Dad would be proud of how we're using his legacy. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd told Ryan about the money from the beginning. Would his family have treated me better because of it? Would he have stood up for me sooner? But then I remember that the point was never about getting better treatment because of my wealth. It was about being treated with basic respect because of my humanity. Victoria still sends Christmas cards, usually with updates about Ryan's life that I don't need or want. I heard through those cards that he got married last year to a woman from what Victoria describes as a lovely family, code for wealthy and white. I hope he's happy. More importantly, I hope he learned to defend his wife from day one. As for me, I've learned that the right person doesn't need to know your net worth to see your value. David proposed last month, not with a prenup, but with the simple question, "Want to build something beautiful together?" I said yes. We're planning a small wedding and we're writing our own vows. No prenups, no family lawyers, no protection against imaginary gold diggers. Just two people who choose each other, respect each other, and see each other's worth beyond any bank account. That prenup that Patricia forced me to sign ended up being the best thing that ever happened to me. Not because it protected her son's money, but because it revealed everyone's true character. It showed me I deserved better than conditional love, better than tolerance disguised as acceptance, better than someone who would only defend me once they knew I didn't need defending. My father's gift wasn't just the money he left me. It was the lesson that true wealth comes from knowing your worth has nothing to do with what others think you should have. Patricia's prenup was supposed to be my humiliation. Instead, it became my liberation. Never let anyone make you sign away your worth. Never accept less than you deserve because someone else can't see your value. And remember that the right person will defend you from day one, not just after they learn you can defend yourself. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Subscribe to Hidden Hearth for more real-life stories that will surprise and inspire you. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever been underestimated because of your background? I read every single comment. Until next time, remember, you are worth more than anyone's opinion of you.